Welcome to Life in Red.
Finally back with some new episodes and pleased to be joined here today to kick off, I don't know, not a new season, but we'll say that for now. Devon Hall, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm pretty stoked to be here. I don't get to do a lot of podcasts these days.
And we were connected through friend of the show and Twitter pal Ashley. So shout out to Ashley for making the recommendation here of
super shout outs. Thank you, Ash. I seriously, I love that girl. And it's funny because when I first met her, I was like, okay, she's really nice and normal. And then I interviewed her for my podcast, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. And I was like, nope, she's not. She's just like me. And that's perfect. Like we vibe and it's good. And I just adore her.
Yeah, that's it's funny. It's that the thing, like whenever I'm giving a speech about mental health, it's like that whole thing where it's like, oh, you're not alone, and how much of a weird thing to face that is. It's like, oh wow, yeah, other people have been through shit like I have, but like also I love them for it because they can totally relate to me.
I was literally writing a post about that last night, and then I was like, no, I couldn't post it because it was Thanksgiving, and I'm like, okay, here's the thing, I want to be grateful and I want to be happy, but like millions of people died for this holiday to exist.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that like, cool, I'm not alone because they suffered too, but I'm not grateful that they suffered. So I had a moment and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna not do a Thanksgiving post and I'm just gonna let this year ride.
Yeah, and similar to sort of like Canada Day when that was happening. Like those are good discussions, and we're gonna get into that. But I want to start. You are known online as the Loudmouth Brown Girl, and I want to know, yeah, how did that identity, that name, besides maybe the obvious, come to be?
It's funny because publicly I always talk about how I got arrested and the cop called me a loudmouth brown bitch, and shout out to him because like Rihanna got nothing on me. This is going to be the biggest brand in the world one day. But it actually started when I was a kid. I'm loud, I'm mixed race, and my skin color is brown. And I was constantly being told to quiet down and lower my voice and stop talking so much. And, it's great that you have ideas, but let the adults handle things. And it's like all of my creativity throughout my entire life was hindered by people telling me who to be and what to be. And even now, I'll hear the voice of somebody that's like, do this. And then I'll start doing something and I'm like, fuck. Am I doing it because I want to do it or because I was told by somebody, usually a white guy, to do it years ago? And then, it kind of became whatever. But when I got arrested specifically, and he called me that, I looked at him for a minute and I'd been screaming. I was in the middle of a panic attack. I had actually just started smoking cannabis and I had not smoked cannabis for like years. I would smoke here or there at a party, but I was very cautious about who I smoked with, when I smoked, how I smoked. And I had just started, and then I'd gone on a trip for CJSF radio. And because I didn't, cannabis was brand new, didn't know if I was allowed to travel with it. I didn't bring anything with me. And everybody on the trip was drinking, and I'm not a big drinker anymore. Kind of did that in my 20s. And so the whole trip was a nightmare. There was racism, and somebody stole my keys out of my purse and went through my room and tossed my room around. And the security guard was very understanding, and the university that we were staying at was completely not understanding. Like they didn't get single woman, first trip alone as an adult, Black woman in a city full of people that don't particularly like Black people and are genuinely shocked to see Black people. Like one woman walked up to me and she's like, "You're Black." And I went, "Yeah, thank you. I know. I've been this way for a while now. I'm like really proud of it." And there was a whole group of white people that I'd been traveling with behind me, and they were like, "We can't believe she did that." And I went, "Really?" Like that's, if you're Black in Canada or the States, that's kind of not a surprise. It happens, right? So the whole trip was stressful. And then coming home, I just kept thinking like, this really sucks. This was my first adult trip. And I was feeling really cool because it was my first adult trip for a radio station. So like, that's really cool. And it was just destroyed by, like I try to ask people for directions and they literally ran from me. was like, oh my God, Black person, don't go talk to her. And then all of the other things. And then coming home, it was like, I don't want to come home, because if I come home, I have to deal with all the stuff that's in my head that was triggered by all the things that I had just gone through. And all of the things in my head are really awful, terrible, evil things. And I just started to panic. And the airline did not help. They moved passengers away from me. They called the police. They had the plane downed. And so it was like a situation that could have just been like, calm, breathe, take your time, just got exponentially worse by all of the people who were like, oh, she's panicking on an airplane and she's brown, better call the cops. And then racist white cops. And there was a female cop, and I was like, she'll understand. No, she was not understanding. So when he called me that, I came home and I sat on my balcony and I thought about it for a really long time. And I had weed in my pocket. I don't know if I picked it up. I don't know how I got it, but somehow there was weed in my purse. And I sat and I thought about it, and I was like, get drunk, get super freaking hammered, because you can feel a whole lot of stuff coming, or get high because you can feel a lot of stuff coming and you don't want to be an alcoholic. And that was kind of the thought process. And so I got high and I started painting and I started drawing and I started writing. And these were things that I had never done in my life. And I started dancing and I got weird. Like I would drum on my legs for hours. And my mom's like, can you get bruises? Like that's worrisome, right? And what it was all of the parts of myself kind of being like, oh, we are done. We're done with racism and being raped and being traumatized and being abused by white people. And cannabis being like, oh, cool, we're going to heal now. And that healing process led me to creating Loudmouth Brown Girl, because by nature, I'm a writer. And I always thought like, I'm going to write the great fiction novel of Canada, and I'm going to tell this cool story about Gastown in Vancouver. And, it was going to be like, I'm going to sell it to Harlequin Romance and I'm going to make $1 million and be a famous author. And that did not happen. It started being about me and about the things that I went through. And it's now exploded into this weird thing where I'm like, I can say what I want and do what I want and not care, because it's the job to not care what other people think. So it's been a pretty cool and weird and strange experience.
There's a lot to be said about art in general. So whether that's, you said painting, writing, podcasting, music, and how therapeutic and cathartic that could be to any healing process. I know for myself, writing and music are a huge thing for me when I'm going through like a depressive episode or something. So before all this, you threw out a couple pretty hard to hear things already. Prior to this new platform and identity as Loudmouth Brown Girl, was mental illness something you always struggled with? And was that the story, I mean, you kind of gave me a warning off the top before we started recording, and I'll just kind of let you go and tell your story the way you would like it to be told. But how did this all come to be and to reach that point of the story you just told?
So I'm going to pause your audience right now, and I'm going to do a little bit of a trigger warning on my own. The story that I have in my head is discombobulated. There are pieces missing. There are names missing, dates missing, hours missing, weeks. There are solid weeks of my teen years that are completely blacked out by what I went through. And so take a minute and really think about whether or not you want to hear this. But if you're still listening, I was a child sex slave. And I was raped by more than one prolific, well-known, famous people. I have named them in the past when I first started Loudmouth, but I'm not going to do that now for a variety of reasons, but namely my safety is pretty much the thing that I'm most concerned about, and the safety of other victims. But they're incredibly famous, and they're incredibly famous for being rapists and for keeping women, like adult women, against their will and confining them in spaces that they shouldn't be confined. It's not as well known that there were children involved, and there were many of us. There were drugs, there was brainwashing, there were beatings that there were things that happened to me that people who worked at Guantanamo Bay have been arrested for in Canada. And I would love to give you an age of when it started, but like for me, sexual abuse started really young. I remember being baptized and the priest doing something that he shouldn't do. I remember another priest doing something he shouldn't do. And then standing in front of my class at my school that was attached to the church, telling us that if we engaged in sexual activity, not only was it the girl's fault, but that we would be going to hell. It's less bad if it's the boy, but if it's the girl, clearly she wanted it, because otherwise the boy wouldn't advance, was basically the message that we were given. So there was a lot. There was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of teachers kind of knowing what was going on, but in the 90s, we weren't as open with sexual abuse conversations. Mm-hmm. And so nobody taught us how to say things like, oh, okay, so I was just raped. So instead of saying those words, I would scar my body. I would trip and fall, or I would accidentally on purpose cut myself. I would scratch my legs. I have scars up and down my legs, and every single one represents a time when I've been sexually abused or emotionally and mentally violated. I'm oddly proud of them because I'm like, these are my battle wounds and I survived. But by the same token, today, for instance, it's weird. I'm wearing a dress. I never wear dresses. And I saw a TikTok that was like, maybe I'm just too lazy to wear pants. And I was like, yes, that's it. I'm too lazy to wear pants. And so I'm very confident in my scars, and I'm trying to save money to do a photo shoot so I can proudly show them off. But they come from very dark places. And it's largely because in the 90s, we didn't know how to express, like I said, the fact that we had just been abused. And when someone came to us and said, hey, I've just been abused, the person receiving that information often didn't know how to react, because we didn't talk, like we talked about PTSD in Alberta a lot, but specifically it was like, well, soldiers get PTSD because look what they've just been through in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was, I think Oprah in like 19 something or other 90, she had Queen Latifah on, and I had just done a stint at a mental hospital, which is one of the worst mental hospitals in British Columbia. And I would like you to think like locked doors, automatic metal doors, the whole bit, security guards and peepholes, everything, right? So it was an intimidating place. And my mom was listening to Oprah when I got home, and I was doing the dishes, and Queen Latifah said, I was raped. And I dropped the dish in my hand into the sink. And I remember looking to my right and remembering that I had been raped in that kitchen by grown men who had broken into my house and who had bought me. And my mom was at work, and I had been sworn to secrecy and brainwashed and all the things. A neighbor knew. A neighbor downstairs knew, because she had come upstairs to borrow sugar, and they were there, the men that abused me. And she was threatened with death to stay silent. So she never said anything. She had a young child. And when Queen Latifah said that, I came out of the kitchen and into the dining room, and I looked at my mom and I said, that happened to me once. And the truth was that it had happened several times over several years by several different abusers. Tyler Perry talked about this on Oprah as well, that Black kids tend to, or colored children tend to be abused prolifically throughout their lifetime by many different abusers in many different stages of their life. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, what Queen Latifah just said had happened to me. And that was the end of the conversation. We never talked about it again. She didn't know what to say. And I didn't know how to describe it. How do you tell your mother that you were forced to do things on the same chair that she is currently sitting in when you're 15? Or that your banister was used for things that banisters shouldn't be used for, right? And so we never talked about it. And then when I had the panic attack and I started just getting angry, like angry. And any survivor, any victim, that is my best advice. Like, get pissed. Get angry that you've been violated, that you've been abused, that you've been traumatized, that your safe space has been destroyed by people who think that they have the right to destroy your space because they want to. Because that's really how Loudmouth got started. I came out, told my story, I named names. I didn't care. The first year was all about like, here it is, world. This is my darkness, because I needed to get it out. I needed to release it. And the second year, I kind of calmed down and I was like, oh, that was probably a bad idea. That's probably not my best moment. And I laugh because I think it's hilarious. Like, it took me being kicked by a cop to finally be like, wow, I'm done.
Your story, I mean, a lot
It's
of
crazy,
things
right?
It's one of those things where, especially, someone like me who grew up in middle class, like near like where I'm from, Ottawa, like it's just, those are the types of stories that you're like, oh, that's in the movies, oh, that's in the news somewhere far away.
Yeah.
You never think about it at home, and it's such a cognitive dissonance for all of us, like, because sex trafficking is on the rise, not only around the world, but here in Canada.
I'm going to correct you because I don't think that it's on the rise. I think what's happening is that more and more people are talking about it.
Right.
In the 90s, we didn't use words like sex trafficking in conjunction with countries like America, England, Ireland, Scotland, Canada. Those were not conversations that we had growing up, right? It was like, that's the kind of stuff that happens in Africa. Right. And so I seriously grew up thinking sex trafficking only happened in Africa. And then literally a week ago, I saw one of my rapists on the news being charged. And I went, oh my God, I'm a part of a conspiracy. And it was like this freaky, fucked up moment where I'm like, holy shit. Like, so one day that's going to be a TV movie. And actually, one of my abusers has a TV movie based on what he did, which is disturbing in of itself.
Yeah, but I just wanted to touch on the point too that stuff like the internet, so your platform, whether it's what you see on Twitter nowadays with women coming forward with their stories of abuse, because so you said for the most part you tried to tell your mom that what happened and you didn't really know how to deal with it, and even being able to come forward and even say that to your mom, I think, is hard for a lot of victims of abuse. I've never been a victim, but I have heard enough stories now from friends and people on this show how difficult it is and why women especially don't come forward with it. Did you try to tell anybody else what happened? And I think the biggest thing is, were you believed? Because that seems to be the biggest issue.
No. So one of my abusers, we'll call him TV movie guy, he followed my family from Alberta to be here in BC before traveling somewhere else. And so when I came forward right in and around when I started Loudmouth, I wrote 6 journals and I named all of the names that I could remember of other victims. And I had actually gotten gang raped again. not too long ago. I can't tell you exactly what year, but not too long ago. And many of the boys that I had been forced to lay in my own bed with as a child, because of this man, grew up to be men who raped me again. So that's fun. It's a good, terrible, awful reunion. And I'm flippant about it because I have to be. Like, I'm not trying to diminish what I went through or what we went through. Like, I'm laughing because it's just insane to me that, like you said, this is not something that the average person can understand living in a middle-class neighborhood. I have lived in poverty my whole life, and even I'm just, oh, fuck. Like, how did this happen that nobody noticed? When I came forward and handed in those journals, somebody was there, a psych nurse, because they were doing a wellness check along with me reporting. And I was asked if I knew a specific girl. And this girl in particular is actually very famous in my community, because her boyfriend was a gangster. And I say was because about 3 weeks after I was asked about her, she overdosed in a hotel room. So I made 3 reports in 2 different cities. And I was called psychotic. I was called crazy. I was committed a couple of times. I had a massive panic attack and rushed to my tattoo artist to be like, call the freaking police, call the paramedics. I need to go to the hospital. And I couldn't even get the words out because I was in such a state of shock. I was in an appointment with a counselor. And while we were talking about why I was blocked in my fiction writing, which is what my focus had been from the beginning of our meetings, I realized that this particular counselor, who I found on Google, was there the night that I was gang raped. So I'm sitting in his office and I'm looking at him and I'm trying to figure out, like, why all of a sudden, after like 3 months of seeing this counselor, do you suddenly feel so familiar? And I just picked up a bag of weed. So I was like in a good mood. I was like, I'm going to go to my counseling appointment. I'm going to get some stuff off my chest. I'm going to go home. I'm going to bang out that first chapter and I'm going to get my book written. Right. And I'm in the middle of downtown Vancouver, and like, which is an hour and a half away from where I live. So I'm as far away from home as I can get. I don't drive, thank God, because that would have been a nightmare. And I'm realizing this man that I've come to for safety and protection and love and support knows my rapist and has known all of this time that I was one of his victims and said nothing. And I lost my shit. I started screaming. I made a couple of women walking down the street as I was leaving the office call 911 because I knew that I couldn't handle what was coming. It was a trigger. Realizing that this person that you were paying to take care of your mental health is one of your abusers and has been for like years. That was the first time I was like, oh, that's a trigger. And then trying to translate that to the police and say, hey, this happened to me. This is a real thing that happened to me. And they're like, yeah, you're nuts. So I was locked up in Vancouver. I was locked up in Surrey a couple of times. I had doctors who were not only involved, but knew what was happening, who lied and said I was crazy on purpose because looks good for them. Basically every cliche movie trope that a rape victim can go through, I have been through. And all this to say that, like, I worry sometimes about telling my story because I don't ever want anyone to think, okay, well, if that happened to her, then I can't come forward. Because there are really great cops out there. Like there are, there's one in particular from Vancouver Police Department named Brian, whose last name I don't know, but he was amazing. Like he talked me down. He was super supportive. He came back after, he did aftercare, he checked on me, he checked in with my doctors, he checked in with my family, he actually investigated the case. And lo and behold, my rapist is on his way to prison. So it worked out, right? But the process of realizing what you've been through, acknowledging what you've been through, writing it down and putting it on paper so you can look at it, and then going and telling someone, that is oftentimes for a lot of survivors worse than the actual abuse.
Because you're reliving it like constantly.
It's not, honestly, I've been reliving it for the last 3 years, like everything, every single abuser has been kind of popping into my head. That's not the worst part. It's the putting on a show part. It's the waving your hands and being like, look at me, notice me, understand that I'm telling you my truth, that it matters to me, that it's important to me, that it hurt me, that it violated me, right? And then trying to find people who are both willing and able to pick up that weight and be like, hey, you're safe with me, and actually genuinely be somebody you can be safe with. Because we didn't talk about abuse in the 90s, because we're not conditioned yet in our evolutionary stage to understand how to cope with abuse and how it affects people, and because we're still learning about the science experiment of abuse and trauma, there aren't a lot of people who are prepared to be like, whoa, Devon, I'm here. I can physically be here. I can hug you. I can let you scream. I can let you cry. I can be in the same space as you. There are not a lot of people that can handle that because they don't know how. They've never been taught, right? And so it's scary when you see somebody who, yeah, she's strong and she's confident and she's powerful. There were whole years that I had no mental health problems. I was pissed off all the time. I just thought it was because I hated people. I didn't realize it was because I was seriously fucked up, right? Like I didn't know. And so when all that came up, it was like, oh, that explains a lot. That makes sense. I'm not really crazy. People are just awful. And so I've done a lot of it on my own, but I will say there are some pretty phenomenal people that have stuck by me, Ashley being one of them.
I think you just pointed out some of it. Again, it's the stuff you hear on the news, and you can use this example with anything, that whether it's abuse, whether it's COVID and the pandemic, whether it's a shooting spree in a school, we become so disconnected from the humanity of these stories. So when a woman or a person comes forward with their stories of their abuse,
it's like seeing a unicorn.
Yeah, it's so easy to just be like, like, oh, it's like a movie, right? Like you're just like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, or like able to poke holes or something, especially when you don't understand trauma and PTSD and all the things that go with it, where your memory becomes fragmented, just like you said right off the top, that you'll remember bits and pieces, but not all of it, or names, or you'll remember faces, right? And so when you're looking for, I'll say, quote unquote, justice, especially in our justice system, and you're looking for this very descriptive narrative, it can't be there. It's almost never there. And
it's not.
And that's
somebody
how
asked me, they were like, when are you going to write a book about your life? And I'm like, never. Never. I write about, the life lessons, and I write about certain instances where I learned something, but I specifically stay away from like, this person did this on this day at this time. And because I'm really learning, and I'm going to shout out the Afro-Canada Bud Sisters here, because I actually left the group because I realized I was traumatizing them by sharing my trauma with them. Right. And I wasn't meaning to, and they weren't trying to be cruel or anything, but like my stuff is so dark and so twisted that, like you said, like, and like I said, they couldn't believe it. And they were like, at the end of a conversation with me, for them, it's like, oh, now I got to decompress from kind of trying to take Devon's load. And so I'm really lucky that I have a huge support system, but I only have that support system because I lost my freaking mind. Right? Like I went nuts. And when I think about my writing, I'm like, I don't want to contribute to trauma porn. Because there are some super sick people out there that are like, oh, she went through that. That's really hot. No, it's not. It's twisted. It's evil. It's disgusting. It's wrong. It's all of the things that are terrible about humanity. That's what I went through. Right. And on one hand, I don't want to traumatize people. And on the other hand, I don't want it to be like, I just don't want the comments of like, oh, well, why didn't you just leave? Because I was freaking brainwashed, man. Like literally brainwashed. And when I say that, people are like, oh, she just means she got hit. No, my brain was rewired literally by hypnotism, right? And when you say that, people are like, but hypnotism doesn't work. Oh, yes, it does. And I'm not the only one. And so it's really difficult sometimes for me to write or to even be the loudmouth brown girl, because I'm like, I just can't do it today.
That's the thing about, you said hypnosis, but even, manipulation. You talk about things like Stockholm Syndrome, all
Stockholm
these things.
Syndrome is definitely something I was going through.
Yeah, like people, like that's the thing what people don't understand. Why don't you just leave? Why didn't you, why don't you just say no? Why don't you, like, all the excuses and putting the onus on you as the victim, instead of us, and the society does this, instead of being like, why didn't the abusers not abuse, right? We're always trying to find ways for the victim.
Oh my God, I think I love you. Do you want to get married and like not have babies and not really get married? Yeah, that's it exactly. Why did
do
they
that
not
all the
abuse?
time?
Yeah.
Especially with young women. I think about the college scant, right? It's always, well, why didn't you do this certain thing to like protect your safety, instead of putting the onus on people, in particularly men, to not abuse and rape people. Like
I can tell you what that is. In the 90s, I am sure you had this conversation with your parents. Don't put your hand on the stovetop because it's hot.
Yeah.
And then if you do it and you get burned, they're like, but we told you it was hot. Okay, great. Well, you didn't tell me that my best friend was going to grow up to be a rapist because he was abused as a kid too. Like, I didn't know that that was going to be something I had to go through. And you didn't prepare me for this, right? And it's because my mom, God love that woman because she puts up with hell from me. My mom grew up in the 50s and they did not talk about abuse. Her parents grew up in the 20s. They certainly did not talk about abuse. Their parents grew up in the 1910s. Abuse was not a word that was used. It wasn't even in the dictionary, right? If a woman got pregnant in 1910 against her will, she either got an abortion and she was shamed because how dare she get pregnant, or she was killed because how dare she get pregnant, or she was forced to marry her rapist who then resented her because he had to marry her to keep up looks and present, and like it's never stopped. Women have always been the person that gets blamed because it's easier to blame the victim than it is to go after the criminal. And it really is easier to go after the criminal because we have memory lapses, we have PTSD, we have trauma, and the world doesn't understand trauma.
Yeah, it's I don't like, I wish,
It
I mean,
sucks.
yeah, I mean, just to put it plainly, absolutely. When you created this and you started sharing your story kind of publicly for the first time, have you had a lot of people, I wouldn't even say, have you had people reach out sharing their stories,
Yes.
sharing that maybe they were part of this with you, and like this, like, was there a lot of people reaching out?
No, there's not. There is nobody from my past commenting or posting or sharing their side. And I think it's because they're scared. A lot of the boys that are now men have kids. And I am terrified that they're going to abuse their kids. I'm sure they're terrified they're going to abuse their kids. I'm sure the people in their lives are terrified that they're going to abuse their kids. I have put a spotlight on a lot of people without even naming some people in those journals, naming some people on the blog, and then taking it back and being like, let me take those names down. There are people in my community who know who did what. And in my neighborhood. And sometimes I'll walk down the street and I'll get a nod from people. And I'm like, you read the blog. Because when I first started, I wrote a blog post about how if you recognize somebody in camouflage, chances are they're wearing that because they're a survivor. And that pattern reminds them of the battle that they're going through. And I say that because I grew up next to an army base. And that's what that pattern means to me. It means like fucking fought for your life, your whole life. You fought to survive this. And so I had written a long post about, nodding and just kind of acknowledge if you know somebody is a survivor, here are some simple things you can do to acknowledge that you understand they've struggled. And so I'll get a nod every now and then. I'll get a smile. I remember when I first started it, I was at New West SkyTrain, and this Indian woman, bloody gorgeous Indian woman, by the way, she looked at me and she smiled this giant smile. And she looked down at her little girl who had to be about 8 or 9. And she nodded her head and she looked at me and she's like, kind of doing this. And I was like, holy fuck, she read the blog. Like that, she's telling me she read the blog. And that was the moment that I was like, yep, this is me. This body, this mind, this soul is the Loudmouth Brown Girl. I've also, though, had people who look at me who I know I've never met before in my life, but I know they've read the blog because they will walk across the street and they'll do like a U-turn. So like they'll cross the street and then cross back to like get away from me. It's like any association with me is a danger. And it just makes me laugh because I'm like, all right, that tells me that you know who I am, you know what my message is, and you stand with my abusers. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for showing me who you are. Because now I know to stay the hell away from you. Right. And I appreciate that. I appreciate both. But in terms of people who were involved, not a single person has come forward to say she's not crazy and it happened, which I kind of expected.
On one hand, I understand, especially with people who are victims, but like to know that like no one's willing to be in your corner from that aspect of it. Like you sound like you've come to some sort of peace with it, but I imagine that wasn't easy.
I think the hardest part, like there were people, I still cry. I cry every day. There is not a single day that goes by that this body does not cry over what happened. And there are people that I miss very much and personalities that I like am super grateful that I got to meet, right? I got to meet some pretty cool people. But I'm pretty content with them not being in my life because even though they were really cool people, they were also really toxic people. And the thing you have to understand is a lot of the guys that were abused when I was a kid with me or who abused me grew up to become gangsters. And they joined several gangs, some of them famous, some of them not. And so that's the rule. You leave, that's it. You're on your own. Like you are done. You are on your own, and we're not coming to save you. We're not coming to help you. We're not coming to protect you. Whatever happens, that's what happens. I'm very, very blessed in that there's quite a few gangsters that are like, yeah, go ahead, come at her, see what happens to you. But that being said, they're still living that life, right? They're still living drugs and gangs and girls, and their livelihood depends on it. Like I am not advocating for gang life. Gang life is fucking stupid. If you can get out, leave, run, pack your shit, get the fuck out of town, go as far as you can. But if you can't, I get it. Like I understand. Gang life gets so, especially when they go after kids, right? Gangs go after kids because they get you when you're young, and then they can blackmail you and they can threaten you and they can scare you and they can hold that over your head. And then as you get older and you fall in love and you have kids, now your kids are going to be part of the gang, whether you like it or not, because that's their collateral, right? Do as we say, or we're going to come after your kids. And so how do you leave? How do you pack up 3 kids when you're living in poverty? Because yeah, you're selling dope, but you're selling dope as a low-level street dealer who's been selling dope in the same street for 25 years. Like, I literally know a guy who's been selling drugs on the same fucking corner for 25 years. Sure, he has fancy cars, but they're not his. He has to change them out because they're stolen. Because it's all a part of the look. It's the aesthetic, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I took my drug money and I went and bought myself a car. No, he took his drug money and he went and stole a car so he can look cool for a couple of days. So how do you leave that life when it's all you've ever known, when your kids are at risk, when the woman you love is at risk? The girl that died, her boyfriend's still in prison. Like, she should have gotten married and had kids, and she never got the opportunity because she was busy waiting for him to make enough money that they could move on. And then he just never did.
It's like just the cycle, right? And you
It's
see
a
this
terrible cycle.
And again, it's one of those things. It's more portrayed in America, I think, because we see that a lot more in American media than we do in Canada. Like, I don't think a lot of Canadians, unless they're living it or like live near it, understand the level of poverty that exists in this country, especially with Indigenous communities, with immigrant refugee communities, and in all these kind of small towns that are, even though the cities, and I know in BC especially, has a very high homeless population, and the opioid crisis is really taking its toll, but especially on the northern interior of BC, I know is also very hard hit.
I would say that it's actually worse in the places where it's coldest in Canada.
Right.
Because it's cold in Canada, man. You can't you can't grow cannabis, you can't grow hops, you can't grow vegetables, there are places that don't have a freaking movie theater, and everyone's like, oh, what a big deal, you don't have a movie theater, you use Netflix. Well, they don't have cable.
That's another thing.
Cold, right? They don't have cable, they don't have news, they don't have anything outside of their community. All they have is their community, and their education, by the way, sucks, and they don't have clean water because the pipes are frozen. And so what do? You do drugs because you just want to fucking forget how miserable life is and how you can't get out, because where are you going to work? Only one grocery store, and the 4 people that work there are not leaving anytime soon because that's their livelihood, right? And so, yeah, it's really bad in BC, but it's a lot worse, I think, in places where it's a lot colder in Canada, and even in places in Alaska, where they don't have access to first world things. Like, we joke all the time, first world problems, can't go to Starbucks, got to go to McDonald's. Okay, well, what if you didn't have a McDonald's in your town? What if it cost you $30 for a head of lettuce? Because there are places in Canada where it costs $30 for a freaking head of lettuce. And that head of lettuce better last your ass a long time, because that $30 might be the only $30 that you have.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so out of sight, out of mind for most of us.
Yeah.
And we play such we're just so ignorant to it. We just put the blinders on.
Well, it's because we're conditioned to be, though, right?
Yeah.
We, like, human beings are tribal, and it's our natural instinct to stick to our tribes. Yes, we pick our friends through school and we pick our friends through work and stuff, but like, I'm sure there's people you work with and you're like, yeah, you're cool to hang out with at work, but I do not want to see your ass after. Like, I don't want to go for beer, I don't want to go for pizza, I don't want to go to a game, I don't want to be in the same room with you if I don't have to be.
Cannot confirm or deny.
Right. And so when you're lonely and you don't have anything, what do? You do drugs. And then when you can't afford your drugs, well, do me a favor, go get me some shoes, go get me a coat, go do this little favor for me. And then it ends up being bigger favors and bigger favors and bigger favors and bigger favors, and before you know it, you're in a gang. And like, I worked at a freaking church, dude. I worked at a church serving homeless people, and I ended up in a gang. Or rather, I ended up as a gang girl. That was not a choice. I walked into a bar, I sat down to have a beer, and then I kept going back because some of the guys were cute. Mind you, I was drinking a lot. And some of the girls were fun, again, drinking a lot. And I liked getting dressed up and having a place to go after work.
Normal human things, normal
human things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing I know, I was being gang raped by men that had been boys when I was a girl who had raped me. Like, this was not a choice. This was, I walked into a bar. And as a kid in Calgary specifically, we had a lot of soldiers come and talk to us about like prostitution and how teens get pulled into prostitution and that kind of thing. And it was always like, they come to you in a mall, they come to you in a church, and they're super nice to you, and then they welcome you into their lives and blah, 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 blah. No one said it can happen when you walk into a bar. Oddly enough, even in Surrey, I thought I was safe. Not so much.
What sorts of things, I know you like outside of this thing that you've created now, I mean, talking about it is never easy. I share my story and I know it's always taxing to do so, but you do so in a way that
crash when this is over, like you wouldn't believe.
So I appreciate your energy here for sure to share this with people. But what sorts of things have really helped you get to a place where you're at least able to, you know, keep it together and share the story the way it needs to be told?
I laugh really hard at that because so many people have asked me that. So many people who have heard like some of the most extreme details of my story are like, how the fuck are you so sane? Well, like, seriously, like what's wrong with you that you're not still freaking out? Cannabis. copious amounts of weed. That's it. That's all. And writing. Oddly, maybe a trigger warning, masturbation. The whole reclaiming my body, mine. The whole orgasm is mine and no one else gets to feel it but me. There are some times where I'm like, well, that did not feel so great. That was kind of disgusting, actually. But 69% of the time, those moments are fun and awesome and beautiful and self-affirming and self-loving. Music, dancing, walking, hanging out with my crazy ass neighbor who does not smoke enough cannabis, as far as I'm concerned. My kitten, who has deserted me.
We've seen him pop up a few times.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing. My mom, who drives me fucking mental. So I take a lot of my crazy out on her. But my support group, my Canna sisters. I work with a lot of amazing women, from Canadian Women in Cannabis to Education. I just joined a new group, Women Empowered by Cannabis, or Empowered in Cannabis, all women across the spectrum of trauma and abuse and healing, but they're also women who all work in the cannabis industry. I call myself a canna baby because I just got certified to be an educator, but I'm still doing my CBD training. So I'm still a baby. My Kriya Ohana, my spiritual family, I get really annoyed at them and I tell them that I don't care about them very often because I have mental health issues and I'm kind of a bitch, let's be honest. But the people in the world who read my blog, listen to my stories, who get stoned and hear my voice as I'm screaming, what the fuck did I have to go through all that crap for? I have a wide spectrum of support that make me happy and piss me off and inspire me and push me and challenge me. And I call them idiots quite often because I'm like, but I already knew that. And it's just, yeah, I love my idiots. I love my geniuses. I love all my people.
I think that's a very normal reaction, which I think must like just be so welcome. Like after everything you've been through, to get to a point now where it's just, you know, you have friends that you get in fights with and it's normal and you make up and you can hang out and it's cool.
That part where like we get into fights, but we don't hit each other. And we're not like, hey, let's go get in a fight in a parking lot so the boys can take video. Why don't? Here's a thought. We just talk it out.
Yeah.
Like they do on TV. Like I remember sitting in a strip club looking at my actually one of my best friends in the world who I both love and want to kill in equal measure, being like, I just want my reality shows and a beer. And he was like, what? And I was like, I want to go home. I want to watch Vanderpump Rules and I want to drink beer. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because they don't try to kill each other and they don't pull out guns. They yell and they scream and they go home and they have sex. And he was like, and this is like the gangster guy. He's like, that actually sounds pretty good.
Nothing wrong with that. I want to touch on the cannabis, but I did want to go back a bit to the masturbation part and sex specifically. Not asking it in a grotesque way.
No, go ahead, man. I am an open book. I have no shame.
I have a good friend who also has suffered some pretty horrific things. And, you know, I asked her why, you know, because you hear it as jokes and all the time, especially with men, where you get women who are especially into kinks have, I don't even want to say usually, I don't know the statistic, but, you know, when a woman who's more into kinks are very open about their sexuality, at least in my anecdotal experience, have been a victim of some sort of abuse. And the way she described it to me is you mentioned it, but I want to go into a little bit more detail is the control. It's that you have the ownership of the control, whether it's of your orgasm, whether it's of this dangerous kind of scenario you put yourself in, but is under control. That is some, like, is it therapeutic? Is it, you know, I'm just trying to like understand sort of that psychological aspect of it, because, you know, something that I could never understand myself.
You would make a good counselor because you're making me think about things that I don't really want to talk about, but that I need to and should.
If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to talk
no,
about
it's good.
it.
It's good. It's good. There's a purpose behind everything. And this in particular might explain some of that. So I don't know if you've ever heard of IMVU, but I used to go on there a lot. And I was constantly getting into these like pseudo online relationships that were not relationships with guys who wanted me to call them daddy, who I wanted to call daddy. And as my kind of like obsession with the daddy kink started to wear off, I started really looking at like the kinds of guys that I was getting into these connections with. And I was like, you're really lame. Like, you're not dominant at all. And that's what I need. Like, I wanted somebody to take control and to like tell me who to be and tell me how to be. And literally none of these guys could do that because I'm super confident. Like, I cry all the time. I have bad days, but I really am super freaking confident. I walk out of the house in shorts and my legs are hairy and my scars are short. I don't give a fuck. Like, if my hairy legs are the worst thing you have to complain about, fuck off. Like, go clean some water. I don't know. Help an Indigenous kid go to school. Okay, leave me alone. And so I met this one guy and he was super lame, but I liked his voice. And I was like, yep, I really like your voice. So I'm going to keep you around for a while. And the more that I talked to him, the more I was like, you're really stupid. Like, you're really dumb. Like, just intellectually, you're a fucking idiot. And I did not go to college. I did not go to university, and you did. And you're so dumb. Like, why am I wasting my time with you? And it was really because I just didn't want to feel alone. And like on the opposite of that, right? In my real life, I wasn't dating. I was not choosing to have sexual relationships. I was deliberately spending time with men that the men in my life who decided that they owned me didn't like on purpose. I did something with person who wears patch in a freaking parking lot. Not my proudest moment. Didn't give a fuck because it was my way of being like, this is mine. This is my, I will share this with who I want to. And so these relationships that I was getting into online and thinking about who I did what with. And the reason that it's so weird is that this particular person is like has a reputation for being super dangerous. I will say it's a little exaggerated in certain areas. I have to be careful of what I say. So if I'm stuttering, it's not because I'm making shit up. I really have to be careful of what I say.
No problem.
Anyways, this person has a reputation, and there were people who saw not what happened or anything. It wasn't like we didn't have sex in a parking lot, okay? But there were some things that went down that were fun for me, and I hope for him. And it was not well received. And because it was not well received, I got punished. And I remember during the night of the rape, I was like, who the fuck do you people think you are? Like, seriously. And one of the guys in the room, he was like, you are so-and-so's piece of ass. And I was like, no, I'm not. Nope, that's not true. That's a load of bullshit. And the reason that that's important is because when we're talking about sexual pleasure and masturbation and abuse, right? It's not even always control. It's reconditioning your brain. Trauma actually rewires your brain. It chemically alters your brain to make you think you deserved it. You did something wrong. There was a girl on a train many months after what happened to me happened, and a man had taken a picture of her under the skirt. And I was standing right there, and I said, sit down. And she's like, why? I said, sit down. Like, he's taking your picture. And I wanted to scream and I wanted to yell, but I was kind of still in my newbie, I've been abused too there phase. So I didn't I kind of was just sort of very passive about my words to him. And she said to me, what did I do? And like, I died inside because I was like, you didn't do anything. You wore a freaking skirt because you wanted to wear a skirt because you wanted to be pretty, and you wore a skirt and he took advantage. That's what happened. You did nothing wrong. And I came home from that encounter and I thought about the IMVU guys, and I thought about the real guys, and I thought about the parking lot guy, and I went, I did nothing wrong. I was not dating anybody. I was not married. I was not engaged. I was, in fact, deliberately not dating anybody in those days because everybody I knew was in a gang and I did not want to become a baby mama. That was like my worst fear. Somebody's been asking me for years, like years, move with me, I'll take care of you, love you, blah, blah. I'm like, no, this is a man-free zone. This is all mine, right? And it's not just, I want to orgasm and I want to feel like it's me in control. It's me reminding the little girl inside of myself, right? Who went through all that trauma. Yo, you're allowed to be single. I grew up thinking I needed to get married and have babies in order to have the stability that I didn't have in my home life as a child. And so I sought out any relationship that I could have, looking for the stability that I didn't get as a kid. And now I'm like, yo, your house is a mess. You have 4 freaking cats and you're 38 and you live with your mom and you're happier than you've ever been in your life. How did that happen? Oh, and you're single and you give yourself the best orgasms you've ever had, and you drink when you want and you smoke weed when you want, and you're safe in your home at long last. Right? And it's all about conditioning the brain and less about the conditioning. The body already knows. Body knows that this isn't fair, that it's not right. It's the inside of your brain that needs to be reminded. You actually can be whoever you want. And if you want to, after abuse, get up on stage and dance naked, baby, go for it. What do you have to hide at this point?
Right. I think women in particular are like just conditioned that way, right? That you're meant to grow up, have kids, find a husband, just get married. And that like any sort of deviation, and to your point, which is probably the most counterintuitive, like the counter opposite of what society tells you need to be happy, right? That like,
you know what's funny is my mom, I remember I was 12 years old and I was in Calgary and I was modeling because I wanted to be a model. I wanted to be Tyra Banks, really. And I remember overhearing her say to a coworker at my school that she was really proud that like I wasn't boy crazy. And I literally thought, oh, I wish she hadn't said that. because in my brain, I was like, do everything the opposite of what your mom says, because it's not cool to do what your mom says. So as soon as she said that, I like immediately became boy crazy. Because I was 12, and that's what happens when you're 12. You do everything other than what your mom says. And then when I turned 36 and I was like, so what if I told you I wanted to maybe marry a chick? She looked at me, she's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, do whatever you want, just be happy. And I went, oh, okay. I shouldn't have been surprised because my mom is super open and super cool. And I'm pretty sure she's secretly gay. But years of being conditioned, yeah, you need a man, you need kids, you need to like settle. Many of the guys, when are you going to settle down and get a guy? And so I would bring these atrocious guys to our table and they would just shake their heads at me and be like, what the fuck's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, you said get a guy. You didn't say get a good guy. You didn't say get a hot guy, get a good guy with a job. You said get a guy. I got a guy. Like, will you leave me alone now? And that didn't work. So
it goes down all the way. And it's something I noticed because I have little brothers and sisters. And it goes down all the way to when they're literally 5, 6, 7, where you're like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? And it's like, I kind of stopped and like, not only should I not be saying boyfriend or girlfriend because that is presupposing that they are straight. So stop that. But also, it's not appropriate to really, I know it's a joke and you mean it lighthearted, but it's just one of those things that you add on to the rest of the narrative of your childhood growing up as you're conditioning them to fit what society tells us what we need to do, right? Like I was saying, like not only the relationship, but also like go to school, get your 9 to 5, get that little cottage on the lake, like all those things. It just starts right there.
I wanted all of those things, man. I wanted the whole package. I wanted the lake house. I wanted the city house. I wanted the penthouse apartment in New York City. I wanted the boyfriend, the husband, the whatever. Like I wanted all of these things. And then I don't know if you've ever seen, I think it's called Savages with Blake Lively. Yeah. Okay, that is my favorite non-porno. It is the best freaking film. All 3 of those people are hot. All 3 of those people are rich. All 3 of those people have weed. All 3 of those people have adventures. All 3 of those people love each other. There is no jealousy, and she gets to do whatever the fuck she wants. Sign me up. That was my freedom movie. I was like, yes, I'm in. And then I think I was 23 or 24, maybe 22. Someone was like, okay, if you could pick between Aaron's character, I don't remember the character names, or Taylor's, who would you pick? And I was like, nope. And all these years later, I still can't pick. I would take both. I would take both. I would fly to Bali and I'd be gone. Y'all would never see me again. I'd be so happy.
Do you, I'm this is like a personal and deep question. So if you don't want to answer it,
because we've been so lighthearted so far.
But I do want to, for true. But I did want to ask it because, it's something like after all this has happened and you're at the point where you're at now, do you feel you're at a place where you can start thinking about having those things again that you dreamed of one more day? Or do you feel because of what happened and everything you've been through, like that was taken and that now you can't have it?
Wow.
Because it's, as you're,
that was like taking a bullet. That's a damn good question.
I just want, like, does life have to be over when you're a victim of abuse?
No.
Or can
No.
keep dreaming?
Life definitely changes. Like it's totally different than what I thought it was going to be. I'm okay. To clarify, because one day he will hear this and he will laugh his ass off if he's not hearing it already through time and space, because I believe in that kind of crap. I am still waiting for Chris Evans. Not at all. That was a Twitter joke that I started years and years and years ago, that he was my future husband. And then I actually was sitting on, I don't know if you have them in Toronto, but we have like sea buses. So they take us from one part of Vancouver to North Vancouver, where like the mountainside is. And so I'm sitting on this sea bus and I look over, I shit you not, it's Chris Evans. He's filming in Vancouver. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm super chill right now. I'm stoned, but I'm super chill. I could take a picture. I could Instagram this shit and it would be hilarious. Twitter has been sitting right there, right? And I seriously, like, it's a 15-minute C bus. So I had time to like sneak a photo. And I thought about it and I was like, nah, it was a self-date night. I had taken myself to downtown Vancouver, gotten super stoned, had a bunch of coffee, was wandering around, and I was thinking about what you're asking, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, fuck, Captain America is sitting right here, my future husband. And I didn't even want to say hello. I just wanted to be by myself. I just wanted to enjoy my own company. And it was nice. Like, it was really nice. And I'm kind of addicted to it right now. Like, I'm super fascinated with myself. I'm overweight, 4 cats, 38, living with my mom, right? Not like, I'm not Beyonce. I'm not Oprah at all, by any stretch. But I'm happy. And that to me is super fascinating. And I don't want to lose that. And I'm not saying that, like, if Chris Evans knocked on my door, I'm not going to say no. I'm not. Like, who fucking, that'd be stupid.
I'm straight
But
and I wouldn't.
No, absolutely I wouldn't. However, in my alone time, right? That's me. Like, I need that. I'm craving that right now. And I'm really lucky because a lot of survivors don't get that. I'm on disability. So every penny I earn from my shop is what pays for the website. I don't have anything extra. I'm still really happy. I like Devon. She's really cool. She's weird and she's magical and she's supernatural and she's crazy and she's funny and artistic. And there's just like nobody in the world that's as interesting as me right now. And that's a really, really blessed place to be.
Absolutely. Like, that's what I think so many people struggle. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much, people adore you. Like, you could be the most famous person in the world. Like, you could have any job. So many people struggle to get to that place that you're in, where you can sit by yourself and enjoy it and be content and look forward to it in even some cases, right? Like, some people dread being alone.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't get me wrong. Fear. I would love to be alone on Fuck Off Island, which is owned by Johnny Depp, because it's called Fuck Off Island. I really want to go there, and it's beautiful, and it's in the Bahamas. I would love that. Okay, I can do Loudmouth Brown Girl anywhere. So if there's any sponsors out there that are like, here's $1 million, I will take that money. But I'll still enjoy my alone time. It's awesome.
Before I let you go, I did want to touch on the cannabis, because this is a big part of your life. It's something I've covered. It's something I've covered. Again, if anyone's interested in more in depth, I have an episode from last year with Maddie Brown. CBD has really changed my life in a positive way. It's
awesome.
Superbly. I started taking it last year in oil, and it's really helped my anxiety, which has been amazing. Do you
smoke it at all, or do you just do the oil?
No, I do smoke it sometimes, but I take the oil regularly. Like, I take that daily as like.
So which do you prefer though? Do you prefer the oil or do you prefer the smoking?
I prefer the oil. I don't love being super stoned. But like with high CBD content, like, I'm happier with that. So I try to get a balance instead of getting, that like purple chronic, those big fancy names with like a huge high THC count that are just going to get me bombed.
It's always the white boys that are like, let me get the purple chronic or the blue kush. I'm like, you're only smoking that because you saw it in a Snoop Dogg album.
Like, I'm like, no, like I would die off that, I think. So, but CBD has been really nice for me. So
good. I love that.
You've kind of danced around it and said it's really helped you, but like, what is it about getting super stoned, or that the cannabis in general has just helped transform your life in this way?
It's so funny because for years, people were like, smoke a joint, smoke a joint, smoke a joint, smoke a joint. I'm like, no, fuck off, leave me alone. I do not want to be stoned. Like I said, I was working at church, and I was working with a lot of people who have severe addiction to crack, to meth, to heroin, to fentanyl, to all of the things, living in severe poverty. for a variety of reasons, some for trauma, some for PTSD, some for shit happened, man. And one day they picked up a pipe and that was the end of that. And so like getting stoned just didn't kind of like make sense to me. But then like I'd go to a strip club and get drunk. And like the firemen that I worked with were like, okay, so you won't smoke a joint, but you'll go to a strip club and hang out with gangsters and I was like, look, drinking is socially acceptable. And I like boobs. Leave me alone. And that was my explanation. But then when I got arrested, I knew that things were going to get so bad that if I started drinking, I wouldn't stop. Like I knew it was going to get bad because it's like your body has this internal register that's like, yo, you've been through some shit. Time to deal with it. We're warning you. Floodgates are opening. Be prepared. And I didn't have a support system. I didn't know where to go or who to talk to. So smoking cannabis was sort of, okay, well, maybe if I smoke weed, I won't lose my shit. Maybe I won't kill myself. Maybe I won't go kill other people. Give me something that will keep me inebriated long enough that I can acknowledge what happened, be angry about it, but not get violent about it. That was my main concern was I didn't want to be the angry drunk black chick going to the strip club to kill the guys who had raped me. And I was really worried that I was going to do that. And so cannabis literally was like, don't worry about it. We got you. And so I had to try a few different strains. I did do blueberry kush for a while, and all it did was put me to sleep. And I was like, I wanted to function. I wanted to be able to work and do stuff. And about 3 years in, I kind of woke up and I was like, whoa, wait, Loudmouth Brown Girl is kind of a brand. It's not just a blog. Like there's a t-shirt line. And there's cannabis involved, and I could, like, there are women who work in cannabis. And it's funny because right before I went for my trip for CJSF radio, I was at a meeting, or maybe it might have been after. I was at a meeting with the whole staff of the station and walked downstairs, and literally like this group of like 50 women all smoking weed. And I took a sniff of the air and I was like, what, where did you come from? Why are you here? Where are you goddesses from? And they were like, we are Canadian women in cannabis. And I went, what is that? I need to know more. Give me more information. And so I got hooked in with them, and it's like women across Canada that smoke weed. And I was like, oh yeah, I found my tribe. And through them, I met Education. And then Education was like, did you know you could become a cannabis instructor? And I went, oh, I could work in a dispensary. I could go back to helping people again. I could be useful again. So I started taking this course from healer.com, written by Dr. Sulak, who I swear to God, I've waited my whole life for this man to become a doctor, to learn about cannabis so that he could teach me about cannabis. Like I have been waiting for him. And I'm loving the course. I'm loving everything I'm learning. I have a network that literally spans the freaking globe, from like Tobago to Paris, of women who smoke and work in the cannabis industry. One of my friends, Stacey Bobak, she just from Education, board member, just went to Portugal to talk about cannabis and to talk about legalizing it there. And we learned through her that they have completely cut out the cartels and they've made drugs legal across the board, all of them, which is so cool. And so now they're trying to figure out how to navigate making cannabis legal for a lot of reasons, but doing it differently than Canada. So, and I'm actually interviewing somebody tomorrow for State Lifted Sis, who is in Europe, who came to Canada, and she was like, yeah, your cannabis is shit show. It's messed up and I don't like it. And it's horrible. So it's going to be interesting to kind of hear how it's different in Europe versus how it is here.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I did know about Portugal.
I literally, dude, I walked out of SFU and there were 50 women smoking weed. They're like, that is a sign from the universe.
Yeah. If everything happens for a reason. I mean,
yeah. I mean, the trip was shit, but like at the end of the trip, I got Canadian women in cannabis out of the deal. So
Yeah. So I guess, well, I don't want to say it worked out, but I mean, it put you to where you are
I am
now.
bitter about the fact that the abusive cop that called me a loudmouth brown bitch and all of the people who abused me before kind of get credit for giving me the title.
Mm,
Like, I'm a little bitter about that fact, but I'm also a little grateful. I won't tell them that. So this is
yeah.
between me, you, and the internet audience. But I am a little bit like, okay, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, listen, this was, a difficult but also amazing conversation. So I really thank you. You've mentioned your website. You have, I've went through it, lots of pieces of writing, cannabis, and you said you had a shop. So where do people find you to find all that and get more information?
So loudmouthbrowngirl.com, Instagram, Twitter, all of the things are there. 604 North will be released, I want to say April 2022. I'm holding on to it. I'm building up content. I'm trying to like get some videos up. I want to do some things. I want to make sure that when you come to the site, because it's a completely different site than Loudmouth Brown Girl. It is 604 North is 100% cannabis. Like everything is cannabis education, and stories about my personal experience with addiction and people who have been through it. So it's all like drug related. I want to hold on to it a little while longer, but I'll announce it on the site when it's ready to go live, and we'll do an event and you'll be invited, and
Oh,
it'll be
wonderful.
fun. And yeah, it's going to be cool. We've got some cannabis educators that are going to come. We've got some people that are in the industry, and it's all going to be through Zoom. I feel like I kind of owe it to the internet world right now to do it through Zoom, because like the whole pandemic, y'all were sort of there for me. So sort of my way of saying thank you. Tickets are going to be super cheap, because I'm broke ass and I need your $2.
Yeah. Fair. Fair.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun day though.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for that on social media
Thank
and your
you.
website. Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to connect with you. Again,
You're
thank
amazing, dude. You should really, really consider counseling if you don't already.
you.
You're
Well,
really good at it.
I work in radio, so maybe completely the opposite. But
You could have your own counseling. I'm saying you ask good questions.
thank you. But thank you for your time and energy, because again, I know sharing these things are not easy at all. So I appreciate you sharing that space with me and my platform and my audience as well. So I hope you have
Can
a
I
good
just say
crash.
thanks for listening? Like, it's not to anybody that's still here hearing me right now. Thank you. Like, it's not easy to listen to this stuff and to take it in and to get inspired to activate. But it sucks sharing your story. I'm not going to say that it gets easier, but I am going to say that it gets easier when you share your story than if you don't.
Yes, I will attest to that as well. So Loudmouth Brown Girl, thank you so much. This is awesome.